I stood at the edge of the dock, the breeze from the ocean lifting strands of hair from my face. The island behind me shimmered in the late afternoon sun green, wild and entirely mine. I could hear their footsteps on the old wooden planks, my mother's voice leading the way, cheerful and unaware. She had no idea. They thought this was just a reunion, maybe an apology, maybe some final closure now that Grandpa was gone. They had no clue what he'd left behind, or to whom. My name is Claire Jennings. I'm 32 years old, a licensed architect, and I've been quietly working overseas for the past 7 years. To my family, I've always been just Claire, not the golden child, not the pride of the Jennings name, just the extra one, the afterthought. I remember once my mom said, while pouring herself a glass of Chardonnay at a Thanksgiving dinner, Claire's more of a ... helper, you know? Not really an inheritor. She didn't say it to me. She said it like I wasn't in the room, like I was background noise to her real life. Well, she's about to find out just how wrong she was. Grandpa passed away 4 months ago, quietly in his sleep just like he always said he wanted. No drama, no hospital. Just the sound of waves and wind chimes outside the guest house on his island, an island I used to visit every summer as a kid, back when he and I were still close. We had something no one else in the family really understood. He saw me in a way they never could. Not just the awkward, quiet girl who read on the porch while the others played volleyball on the beach, but someone with ideas. Someone worth listening to. When I received the envelope thick, handwritten, sealed with his initials, I read it sitting on the floor of my one-bedroom apartment in Barcelona. It wasn't a legal document, not at first. It was a letter. It began, "Claire, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I hope with all my heart that what I'm leaving you gives you more than just land. I hope it gives you back your voice." That line stayed with me. Still does. Now, as my mother and siblings arrive on this island expecting something, probably control, maybe just closure, I'm already here. Already waiting. Already standing tall on ground that no longer belongs to them. No one knows yet that Grandpa left the entire island in my name. Not just the land, not just the property, but every deed, every account, every key. And most importantly, the legacy. They don't know, but they're about to. I don't remember the exact moment I realized I was invisible to my family. Maybe because it wasn't one single moment, it was thousands of small ones. Like when my mom would walk right past my science fair ribbon to hang up my brother's baseball jersey. Or when she introduced me to a neighbor as our quiet one, not much of a talker. I was 12 when it really started to sting. We were having a backyard barbecue. My older brother, Ryan, had just gotten his driver's license, and my parents acted like he'd won a Nobel Prize. My younger sister, Emily, was bouncing around, everyone laughing at her jokes that weren't really funny. I was sitting on the steps, reading a book, half listening to the adults. That's when I heard Mom laugh and say, "Claire? Oh, she'd probably end up working for someone like Ryan someday." Everyone chuckled. I didn't. It was the first time I saw how small they saw me. After that, I tried harder. I started staying after school, joining clubs, bringing home perfect grades. But it never seemed to matter. Ryan could miss curfew and still get rewarded with a new watch. Emily could cry her way out of anything. And me, I was just helpful. Always helpful. "Claire, could you clean up the kitchen? Claire, can you watch Emily while we go out? Claire, I need you to run to the store." They never asked Ryan or Emily, just me. By high school, I stopped trying to impress them. I focused on what I loved drawing. Building things, imagining spaces that didn't exist yet. My room became my sanctuary, covered in blueprints and sketchbooks. When I got accepted into Cornell's architecture program, I told my mom over the phone. She said, "Oh, honey, that's cute. But do you really think you can handle a program that intense?" She didn't even say congratulations. At Thanksgiving that year, they all kept asking Ryan about his new job in finance and Emily about her modeling audition. When I mentioned I won a design competition, my mom blinked like she hadn't heard me, then turned and asked if someone could pass the stuffing. I excused myself early that night and cried in the guest bathroom, careful not to make any noise. Grandpa was the only one who noticed. I'll never forget the Christmas when he pulled me aside and asked to see my portfolio. I was 17. I showed him everything sketches of bridges, dream houses, a concept for a sustainable beach resort. He didn't say much, just looked through each page slowly, nodding, eyebrows raised. Then he closed the book, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "They don't see it, Claire, but I do." It was the first time someone in my family told me I was enough. Not as a sister, not as a helper, just as me. But even Grandpa started pulling away in those last few years. After he moved permanently to the island, we didn't talk much. He was getting older. I was finishing my degree, then moving abroad for work. Life happened. Meanwhile, my family continued on with their subtle exclusions. When Grandpa turned 80, they threw him a huge party. I wasn't invited. "We figured you were too busy." Emily texted me afterward with a picture of her in a floral dress, arm in arm with him. I stared at it for a long time. He looked tired in the photo. Something about it felt off. I wrote to him after that. No response. But now, years later, I finally understood. He hadn't stopped caring. He'd just gone quiet like me. Maybe he knew that the ones who go quiet sometimes leave behind the loudest echoes. Leaving the US was the best decision I ever made. When I accepted the architecture fellowship in Barcelona, I packed 2 suitcases, 1 sketchbook, and 0 expectations. I didn't tell anyone in my family until I was already settled into my tiny apartment overlooking the city's hills. My mom replied to the email 2 weeks later with, "Wow, Spain. Sounds exotic. Hope you pack sunscreen." That was it. So I stopped updating them. While they were posting filtered family brunches on Facebook and bragging about Ryan's second promotion, I was waking up before dawn to meet construction deadlines, studying Catalan at night, and slowly working my way up through a boutique architectural firm known for sustainable design. I loved it. Not just the work, but the feeling of building something that would last. A real foundation, a space that mattered. In 3 years, I went from intern to lead designer. My first major project was a coastal retreat center off the Mediterranean built into the cliffs. Minimal environmental impact, with walkways inspired by coral patterns. It won 2 regional design awards and caught the attention of international developers. When I presented the design at a conference in Copenhagen, a woman approached me afterward and said, "I assumed the lead architect would be some 40-something guy in a suit, but you made that feel human." It was the first time I realized I didn't just want to be good, I wanted to be quietly unforgettable. Still, I never shared any of this with my family. There wasn't a space for it. They sent birthday text group messages with confetti emojis. I replied politely. They tagged me in family photos I wasn't in. I clicked like. They didn't ask about my work. I didn't offer. But quietly, steadily, I built something of my own. By the time I turned 30, I had enough in savings to buy a stake in the firm. I became a partner the following year. And that's when the letter from Grandpa arrived. I remember the day perfectly, rain tapping on the glass, the studio quiet except for the hum of someone's playlist. My assistant handed me the envelope, puzzled. It was couriered to your name. No return address. Inside was the letter along with a scanned copy of a notarized will. The entire island over 70 acres, including 2 houses, 1 dock, a private beach, a wind-powered energy system, and a small art studio was left to me. The letter didn't mention anyone else. It simply said, "They never listened, Claire. They spoke over you, around you, through you, but you always listened. To people, to spaces, to what really matters. This land deserves someone who understands quiet power. It deserves you." I read it 3 times before I could move. In the following weeks, the lawyers confirmed everything. The deed was in my name. The accounts for upkeep, taxes, and maintenance, everything had been prepared. He'd done all of it behind the scenes. Meanwhile, my family acted as though he'd left nothing at all. I watched from afar as they mourned him with vague online tributes, posted sunset pictures captioned, "Rip Grandpa." "We'll miss your grilled corn and dad jokes." None of them knew. Not yet. It took me 2 months to visit the island. When I arrived, everything was exactly as I remembered weathered wood. The smell of salt and citrus, that distant gull cry that always reminded me of summers I used to think were simple. But they weren't simple. I just hadn't understood yet what was happening beneath the surface. I spent a week there in silence, fixing up the old art studio, walking the same trails Grandpa and I once hiked, reading the books he'd left behind, most of them underlined in pen, with notes in the margins addressed to no one in particular. And I made a decision. If my family wanted closure, they would have to come here. And when they did, they'd learn the truth not through confrontation or revenge, but through presence. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't gloat. I would simply exist on land they'd forgotten, but I never did. The boat arrived just after noon. I had arranged everything. Transport from the mainland, stocked cabins, even a local chef to prepare lunch using Grandpa's favorite recipes. I wanted the island to feel alive again, just for a moment. Just long enough for the truth to bloom in full view. From the window of the main house, I watched them step onto the dock, my mother first, of course, in her usual linen set and wide-brimmed hat, followed by Ryan in sunglasses and boat shoes, and Emily taking selfies already. They looked around with a kind of passive curiosity, as if visiting a vacation rental. Like, this place didn't mean anything more than nostalgia and convenience. None of them knew I was already there. I waited. Inside the studio Grandpa built with his own hands, where I'd spent the past 3 days turning it into a makeshift gallery, a quiet tribute to him. His paintings lined the walls. I placed some of my own architectural sketches alongside his, not labeled, just displayed, together, as if we collaborated all along. At exactly 1 o'clock, I stepped outside and made my way toward the gathering spot near the fire circle, where they were all seated beneath the palms. Sipping drinks, I did chilled and waiting. They looked up. My mother blinked twice, confused. Emily tilted her head. "Claire," Ryan said, like I was a surprise guest at someone else's birthday party. I smiled and nodded. "Hi. You're here?" my mother asked, standing. "You didn't say you'd be joining." I kept walking until I stood at the head of the long wooden table. Then I said evenly, "I didn't just join. I invited you." Silence. Ryan frowned. "What do you mean you invited us?" "The lawyers didn't tell us who arranged this whole thing." I took a breath, not dramatic, just calm. "I did. Grandpa left the island to me." My mother let out a short, breathy laugh. "What? No, sweetie. He didn't. There's no way." "It's all legally documented," I replied. "I received the letter and deed 4 months ago. Everything's been transferred. The land, the houses, the accounts, all of it." Emily's glass clinked against the table as she set it down. "Wait, are you serious?" I nodded. They all stared at me. No one moved. Then, slowly, I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter. I didn't hand it to them. I simply placed it on the table between us. He chose me, not out of spite, but because he knew I'd understand how to care for it. My voice didn't shake. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. There's something powerful about being seen in full for the first time, especially by those who never looked in the first place. They didn't speak for a long time. My mother sat down. Ryan leaned back, arms crossed, calculating. Emily looked away, her jaw clenched. And me? I stood a little taller. Later, after the shock wore off, a local official I'd invited Mr. Salgado, a longtime friend of Grandpa's, arrived to discuss the island's updated designation as a protected site for environmental preservation. He shook my hand in front of them all and said, "Miss Jennings, I'm honored to continue working with you. Your grandfather would be proud." The weight of that sentence landed in the center of the table like a stone. No rebuttals. No tantrums, just silence. The kind that settles when something undeniable enters the room. They didn't leave right away. That surprised me, honestly. I expected an exit, maybe some door slamming or accusations hurled across the sand. But instead, they stayed. All 3 of them, lingering in quiet confusion, like people trying to read a language they suddenly didn't understand. That night, after dinner, another meal prepared by someone I hired, another piece of evidence that I was in control, my mother approached me on the back porch of the main house. The same porch where Grandpa used to sit with me and listen to my big, impossible ideas. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood beside me, looking out at the ocean. The moon was rising bright and indifferent. Then she finally spoke. "Why didn't you ever tell us how close you and Dad really were?" I kept my eyes on the horizon. Would it have mattered? There was a long pause. Then she sighed quietly. Maybe not. She turned toward me, her voice a little softer. You know, I always thought you didn't want anything. That you were just content to be on your own. I met her gaze. I was never content. I just stopped asking. Something in her face shifted. Not guilt exactly. But maybe ... recognition. The beginnings of it. She didn't apologize. Not directly. My mother isn't that kind of woman. But she did say, he must have seen something in you that I missed. That hurt more than I expected. Not because it was wrong, but because it was finally, honestly right. I never needed you to see something, I said. I just needed you to look. She nodded. I'm looking now. We didn't hug. There wasn't a big emotional release, but something settled between us, something real, quiet, and unfinished. Later, Ryan knocked on my door. I opened it halfway. He stood there awkwardly, holding a beer. So, he said, guess you're the boss now. I didn't answer. He scratched the back of his neck. Listen, I know we didn't treat you like much growing up. No, you didn't. He winced a little at the bluntness. Then he said, I always figured you were just soft. You know, like not built for the hard stuff. I stepped fully into the doorway. That's because you confuse loudness with strength, he blinked. And I smiled just slightly. You don't need to get loud when you're holding everything, I said. And I am. He didn't argue. Emily never confronted me directly. But the next day, I found one of her notes folded on the table in the art studio. No name on it. Just, I used to think you were boring. But I think I just didn't understand how quiet power works. Sorry. That was more than I expected. I didn't keep the note. I didn't need to. Their words, their confusion, their stumbles, they didn't change what Grandpa had already made clear. This place was mine, not because I asked for it, but because I earned it without anyone watching. 3 months later, the island feels different. Not just because I've renovated parts of it, rebuilt the dock, restored the garden Grandpa used to tend, opened the studio up to local artists twice a month, but because for the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere without asking for permission. That feeling, it doesn't come from titles or deeds. It comes from roots. Every morning, I walk the same loop Grandpa and I used to walk. The sand still shifts beneath my feet. The light still hits the same grove of palms with that golden glow. The air smells like citrus and memory. Sometimes I find myself whispering updates aloud, as if he's still just ahead on the trail. I tell him about the community projects I've started, about the design retreat I'm planning, about the letter I finally wrote to my mother, but haven't sent, because I don't need her understanding anymore. And oddly, that's when she started reaching out. Small things at first. A forwarded email from a preservation magazine featuring the island. A picture of one of Grandpa's old paintings she found in her attic, captioned, "Thought this should be with you." No apologies, no full circle hugs, but small shifts. And I've learned that sometimes those matter more than grand gestures. Ryan emailed last week. He wants to bring his son to visit next summer. Emily tagged me in a post that read, "Some people bloom later, and when they do, the whole garden changes." She didn't name me, but I knew I'm not angry anymore. Not even disappointed, because I've built a life that doesn't need their validation to stand. This island, my island, isn't just a piece of land. It's a mirror. It reflects who I was, who I became when no one was looking, and who I'm now that I've stepped fully into my own skin. Sometimes people won't see you until you're standing on something undeniable. That's okay. Let them arrive late. Let them ask questions you no longer need to answer. You don't owe the world your rage. You don't even owe them your story. But if you're ready, tell it anyway. Not for them. For you!